On this episode of Old Joe's Reminiscence, when the time-traveling astronauts and their chimpanzee companion reach the Pacific coast, they discover something fishy is going on. Appearing on the CBS television network on Friday, October 18, 1974, Tomorrow's Tide was the 6th episode to air. It was the 8th episode in production order. This episode would later make up the first half of the 1980 television movie Farewell to the Planet of the Apes, completing the Planet of the Apes series. Since the TV movies are owned by the Walt Disney Company, I'm required to partially block the video due to YouTube copyright restrictions. I don't know if I'd ever watched this episode when it originally aired, so I'm avoiding a deeper investigation until after viewing. For comparison of the final product to the script, I'll be referring to the second revised final script, which was dated September 4th, 1974. Note that the final revised script is dated only 6 weeks prior to the air date of that episode. If you've been following my videos, you know there will be spoilers ahead, and that's why I'd strongly suggest that you pause this video to go watch the episode before continuing. Then, once that's done, I'll dive right into Tomorrow's Tide. Tomorrow's Tide begins with astronauts Virdon and Burke, along with their chimpanzee companion Galen, running along a sandy beach. Galen is trying to avoid getting his feet wet, but the humans want him to stay in the water to avoid leaving tracks in the sand.
Oh, my tracks are not cause for suspicion in this part of the world, and besides, we are not quite so fond of water as you humans. Yeah.
I knew they'd reach the Pacific coast sooner or later. They've been heading west all along, and Burke wonders if it's Pismo Beach or Malibu. A few episodes back, he'd determined that they were near San Francisco based on the angle of the sun, and in episode 5 they were just roaming through Oakland, California, so it should be easy to figure out where they are. How long have they been traveling south, I wonder? Either way, the beach scenes were filmed even farther south than that, at what appears to be the east beach of Abalone Cove near Portuguese Point. Burke spots something in the water. It looks like a half-sunken raft. The astronauts take off their shirts and some very dramatic music plays while they swim out to the raft. They find a man lashed face up and spread eagle on that raft. As the men start to pull the thing ashore, they have to contend with a shark swimming close by. The script has Burke making one of his off-the-cuff remarks here, but it must not have made the final cut. They get the raft to shore, and the guys cut the man free with Galen's knife. Then they carry him off to a soundstage, where Galen finds a cave. The man comes to, and they ask him his name.
What's your name, huh? Hey, come on, you understand?
We eventually discover that the man's name is Gato, played by character actor John McLean.
John McLean was born John Joseph Williams in Alberta, Canada on January 24, 1918. He graduated from Berkeley, California's St. Mary's College with a master's degree. John was awarded the Bronze Star Medal as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy in World War II. He worked as a reporter on the West Coast before his Broadway debut in Barefoot in Athens. There were already several American actors named John Williams, so John changed his last name to McLean. He started making television appearances from New York as early as 1952. John eventually moved to Hollywood, where he would appear in more and more television roles. He also performed in a few films. He portrayed Boss Keen in the popular film Cool Hand Luke in 1967. Star Trek fans may recognize him as Fento in the Next Generation episode Who Watches the Watchers from 1989. John McLean died at the age of 76 on April 16, 1994.
They keep calling him old. That seems odd to me because he was 10 years younger then than I am now. Gatto is wearing a bracelet that Galen says is a labor camp band. I'm with Galen. If the guy keeps insisting that he's dead, why don't they just let him be dead? Why must they always be sticking their noses where they don't belong? We cut to an outdoor shot filmed at Portuguese Point. A group of humans being guarded by armed guerrillas is spearfishing. Someone yells out.
Shark!
We see the dorsal fin of a shark cutting across the water. One of the men who's out there looks very worried. A gorilla takes a few shots at the shark and it leaves. If you follow Olmsted Trail down from Palos Verdes Drive south, you'll end up at the point where Virdon and Burke pop up to have a look. Burke lets out one of his one-liners.
This is Paradise Cove. They've sure made some changes.
Virdon notices that the fishermen are all wearing that same kind of enforced labor camp bracelet that Gatto had on. Virdon mentions the amount of artillery the guerrillas are packing, and then they're surprised by an armed guerrilla who had sneaked up behind them.
What are you doing here? Who are you? Where'd you come from?
Well, actually, we're just passing through. We would have called ahead, but...
Silence!
I think that sneaky gorilla was played by Larry Ellis in his first ever television appearance. Then we go out to the 20th Century Fox Ranch at Malibu Creek State Park in Calabasas, California. The gorilla takes the men to a small village where the locals gather around and follow them. None of these gorillas seems to be looking for them. Maybe they are far enough south that nobody's heard of them. The two start asking about Gatto, but the other humans just turn away at the utterance of his name. All except for one female, but she's finally pulled away. The armed gorilla who'd found Virdon and Burke reports in to a chimpanzee who seems to be in charge. That chimpanzee is Hurton, played by Roscoe Lee Brown.
African-American actor Roscoe Lee Brown was born in Woodbury, New Jersey on May 2, 1922. His studies at Lincoln University were interrupted by a stint in the Army during World War II. He graduated in 1946, studied French at Middlebury College, and then went on to earn a master's degree from Columbia University. He returned to Lincoln as a faculty member but was distracted by track competitions, winning an 800-yard dash world championship in 1951. He became a sales rep for a wine importer until he decided to turn his attention to becoming an actor with no training whatsoever. With his rich voice and dignified demeanor, Roscoe auditioned and was cast in a play put on by the New York Shakespeare Festival. He moved on to film performances, especially in the late 1960s, and television throughout the 1970s. 84-year-old Roscoe Lee Brown died of cancer on April 11, 2007 in Los Angeles.
Hurton accuses the two men of stealing fish.
You! How many fish do you have in your gullet, eh?
We didn't steal any fish.
Ha! You weren't no band of a fisherman. How else would you get fish to eat if not by stealing them?
Well, if you'll let me explain. You see, we were...
Silence! If they're not fishermen, they're of no use to me. Take them out and kill them.
Burke comes up with a story about the two of them being probably the best fishermen in that part of the world.
If you lie, you die.
Oh, no lie. On the level. Nobody fishes, but nobody fishes like we do.
They make up a story of having been farmers who had wanted to be fishermen. They say they lost their release papers while practicing fishing. Hurton ponders whether he should take them on.
We'll let the fire decide.
If they survive swimming under fire, they will be banded as fishermen. Otherwise, they'll be killed.
Guard them. No food before the test. If we have to kill them, I don't want to waste any fish rations on them. Quotas, quotas. Out.
Galen is still watching over Gato as Act 2 opens. He brings the man some berries. Gato refuses the food, maintaining that he has failed the gods and that he is dead. Galen tells the man that he's a pain in the neck, and then he threatens to feed the man to the sharks. What does Gato care? He's already dead, right? As they're having this conversation, I'm struck by how clean and neatly ironed Gato's shirt appears to be, especially after his recent ordeal. Galen downs the fistful of berries, and he goes out looking for his friends. We then cut to Virdon and Burke at the fishermen's test area. They will be swimming underneath a fire. They watch as a local human is tested first. The uncredited part is played by actor stuntman Frank Orsatti. He makes it to the opposite shore where he triumphantly holds his spear in the air. Then it's Virdon's turn. He hesitates. A shot rings out, just missing him.
I think that's the starting gun.
Virdon dives in, and I was half thinking he would just disappear. But then, what would happen to Burke? Virdon emerges on the other shore with a fish on his spear.
You're a hard act to follow.
Back along the shoreline, a gorilla on horseback has discovered that raft where Gato had been rescued. Back to Burke at the test area. He goes under and everybody watches in anticipation. He comes up with an even larger fish than Virdon's. Herton is pleased. As they return to the village, one of the local humans lingers, looking rather suspicious. He is Romar, played by Jim Storm.
James Storm was born in Highland Park, Illinois on August 12, 1943. He started acting on stage in the mid-1960s and he quickly made the transition to television. He started in soap operas in 1968 as Dr. Larry Woloch on One Life to Live, a part he played for about a year. When Jim left to pursue other projects, his older brother stepped into the role and continued at it for the next decade. Meanwhile, Jim took the role of Gerard Stiles in 81 episodes of Dark Shadows in its final 2 years on air. After that he did the rounds of television shows and made for TV movies like ABC's Tuesday Movie of the Week, Trilogy of Terror. He played Dr. Michael Powers on 195 episodes of The Doctors beginning in 1979. He was Bill Spencer on 460 episodes of The Bold and the Beautiful from 1987 until 2009. Jim Storm has remained active in Hollywood. His most recent role was that of Donald Trump in the 2024 satire film Prisoner Trump, The Dawn of Cell Block B.
Galen has found his way to the village, and he's snooping around. He hides when Romar approaches. The man converses with that woman who had shown interest in the mention of Gato's name earlier.
Did they say any more?
They said nothing.
I am sure they have seen my father. Gato is alive.
Silence.
She is Soma, Gato's daughter, played by Kathleen Bracken. Now there's very little information on Kathleen, not so much as a birth date. She appeared in an episode of The Edge of Night in 1964, and after a 10-year gap, she showed up out of nowhere to appear here. She would pop up now and again, playing bit parts through 1981, after which she went into obscurity. Herton assigns Virdon and Burke to the hut of the old discarded fisherman, Gato. At this point, Galen comes running in to claim his runaways.
There you are. Now, I warned you. The next time you strayed, you would be punished severely, and I meant it. Now, you come on with me.
Wait! Stay! Who are you?
Those two chimpanzees go off to confer. Galen tells Herton a cock and bull story, and when Herton says Galen's story doesn't match what the humans had told him, Galen claims that they were lying. They lie all the time, he says. He offers to take them off Herton's hands, but Herton says it is out of his hands. Since they have lied, their fates are up to the gods of the sea.
Who are these gods of the sea?
The sharks.
We cut briefly to some shark footage, and then it's back to Olmsted Trail with its access to East Beach. Galen protests, but Hurton insists that in areas of production with minimum security, it's the law. Galen asks to be allowed to chastise his errant servants, and he uses this time to pass Virdon his knife. Nobody saw that? It was pretty blatant. Burke speaks his mind, as usual.
Remind me to tell you someday how grateful we both are. Liars, huh? Zuma.
Enough, enough! Send them to the gods!
Virdon and Burke swim out to sea. Now, I'm not certain what's supposed to be happening here, but they all seem to be interested in the final outcome. The men swim straight toward a shark, and then dive into a kelp bed. They're underwater for quite a long time. I've read that the average human can only hold their breath between 30 and 90 seconds. I'm lucky if I can make it to 10. But these two astronauts, they're in excellent physical shape, so I'd say 2 minutes might not be out of the question. The two attack that shark, killing it, and then they bring it to the surface just as Hurton is announcing the end of the test. They were underwater for a total of 1 minute and 41 seconds of film time. Galen then speaks up to claim his slaves.
Your law has been carried out. Now I think I'll take my slaves and be on my way.
Hurton seems to be about to alter their agreement now that the humans have beaten the odds. Just then, a rider shows up with word that old Gatto's float was found on the beach with the lashings cut. That's sacrilege. But Soma is happy to hear that her father might be alive. Hurton tells them that they can't leave just now.
If the old man lives, someone must die.
In Act 3, Galen sneaks into the cave where he'd left Gatto. The old man isn't there. He's on the beach walking out to sea. Galen stops him just in time and leads him back into hiding. Gatto still insists that he is dead.
I am dead.
Galen almost wishes he was.
Oh, look, Gatto, unless you stay out of sight, others may be killed. Now, you don't want that to happen, do you?
It does not matter.
It may not matter to you, but most humans do not share your enthusiasm with dying.
Galen heads back to the village, where his friends are awaiting their fates in Gatto's old hut. They are nervous about the arrival of the ape Bandor, who's in charge of the producing stations and who presides over the banding ceremonies. A gorilla comes in and takes the men out to fish. The two make their way to the fish cart. When they add their fish to the cart, Virdon checks out the ropes for some reason. I'm stumped. They mention, not for the first time, that the fish were being used for fertilizer. It had gone over my head earlier, but now that Burke has mentioned it again, the apes wouldn't be eating the fish. Some would go to feed the humans, but the apes were using them as fertilizer for growing the fruits and vegetables that they eat. We join Galen as he's being bored to death by Hurton's complaining. He sympathizes, but he maintains that those two humans are his.
Oh, I'm not too sure the law of possession holds out here. After all, they came to me and asked to be fishermen.
Oh, but they're liars. Oh, I told you that. They are such terrible liars.
Galen says that his humans will try to escape, but Hurton is having them watched. If they try to escape, they will be shot. Galen claims that Hurton will have gained nothing, and then he, Galen, would be out some good slaves. They would both lose.
But I told you that it's out of my hands. When Bandor comes for the ceremony of the bracelets, he will make the decision.
Then Galen makes the mistake of questioning Bandor's ethics.
Are you questioning the ethics of Bandor? He has high connections in Central City.
Oh.
He knows Urko himself.
So even though Urko doesn't appear in this episode, he does get a mention. Outside, a gorilla is keeping a watch on old Gotto's place. Inside, Galen lets Virdon and Burke know that Bandor knows Urko.
All the more reason why we should split before the big man gets here.
They have a visitor.
Hello.
Gato is my father.
They tell Soma about Gotto. She wants to see him. Now, Virdon says they'd love to take her to him, but they're heavily guarded.
I can help. You're prisoners here, but remember, I can come and go as I please.
Romar exits his hut, looking for his wife. He enters the hut where Virdon and Burke are housed. He's a bit high-strung, and he's going to get them all killed if he's not careful. In fact, it isn't long before a gorilla shoots Romar in the arm and drags him back to his hut. When Virdon and Burke come to his aid, Romar blames them for what happened.
I knew it now would be given to the sea gods like Gato. I knew it was death to mention his name. You did this.
In Act 4, a visitor approaches. It's Bandor, who's an orangutan played by Jay Robinson.
Jay Robinson was born in New York City on April 14, 1930. He attended private schools, entered summer stock, and that led to Shakespeare classics on Broadway. His swift rise to success apparently went to his head, and he was reportedly difficult to work with on set. His career went south when he was arrested for drug possession in 1958, and he spent a year in jail. He did a few bit parts before he was arrested for a second time and went back to jail for another 18 months. His classical training made him a shoo-in for the part of Petrie in the Star Trek episode Elan of Troyes. Betty Davis took note of Jay's talent, and she had him cast with her in the 1971 film Bunny O'Hare. Jay continued acting until the late 1990s. Jay Robinson died of congestive heart failure at the age of 83 on September 27, 2013.
Hurton tells Bandor that he has a special surprise for
I have
him.
a special surprise for you.
We cut to the ocean, where the fishermen are working. Virdon and Burke bring a few fish to the wagon. The apes are arguing about the ropes being missing. Oh, I wonder, who could have taken those? Back at Hurton's hut, he and Bandor discuss 3 new fishermen that he's found to replace the old one that he'd discarded. One they'd raised to adulthood, and 2 full-grown fishermen who'd asked to join him.
Bring in the 2 new fishermen.
He has Virdon and Burke brought in. Bandor doesn't seem to recognize them. That night, Burke is pulling the strands of a rope apart while their fish is burning above the fire. A look at Virdon's handiwork seems to indicate that they're going to teach these villagers how to fish with a net. The next morning, all the humans are gathered around in clean, pressed clothing as Bandor arrives, exhibiting a new fisherman's band. He bands that local who'd grown to be a fisherman, and meanwhile Galen is bringing Gato and Soma back to the village. Bandor suggests to Hurton that they're expanding crop growth. Therefore, they'll need more fish for fertilizer. Hurton says there must be a limit, that he can't keep increasing production. But Bandor mentions the 2 God-sent producers.
And where are they? What? Well, I don't see these 2 new surprises who kill sharks with their bare hands.
It's discovered that Virdon and Burke are missing. Then they hear a gong ring out, and everyone goes to investigate. Why, it's Burke banging the gong on the beach to get their attention. He throws the mallet down and runs into the water, where Virdon is already waiting. As the apes and their human slaves come down Olmsted Trail to the beach, Hurton orders the gorillas to shoot at Virdon and Burke. But Bandor overrides that command. The astronauts are pulling in a net full of fish. I'm not sure how Gato and his daughter are going to figure into all this, but they're standing by watching from behind some rocks. Gato moves forward in front of the crowd at the beach, and he begins directing Virdon and Burke, who dump their haul at his feet. Hurton takes credit for the innovation, of course. Galen brings Soma back to the community, and he's explaining that the netting was all Gato's idea. Yeah, right. If it gets any deeper, I'm going to have to go grab a shovel and my boots. But in the end, Hurton gets to keep his position.
Despite all efforts of those higher-ups to replace you with my nephew.
I appreciate it. I always do my best, as you can see.
Virdon asks Bandor to assist in the greatest catch of all. I can just imagine what they've got up their sleeves now. Speaking of sleeves, where are their clothes? And how will they get them back before the next episode? They have Bandor hold onto a rope while they paddle that raft out to sea. By the time anyone realizes that they've been duped, the three fugitives are halfway around Portuguese Point and out of rifle range. They eventually come aground on a beach. They all tease each other about the positions they've gotten each other into, before having some fun chasing each other around the surf.
Finally, an episode where the gorillas can actually shoot without missing their target. These coastal gorillas are expert marks apes. They hit what they aim at. Whether they're keeping sharks away from the fishermen or stopping a human who's escaping, these gorillas get the job done. The only time a gorilla failed at his task in this episode was when that disappointment of an orangutan and those useless chimpanzees were made to look like fools. They failed to realize that these humans were tricking them in order to get away. By the time the feeble minds ordered the gorillas to fire, the fugitives were already behind the rocky outcropping. I'm certain that if Urko finds out about this dereliction of duty, those in charge will be made to suffer. Otherwise, the only fault I can find is how the humans are always made to look superior to the apes. And every ape knows that that is true heresy. The writers of this episode should be taken out and beaten.
This was a rather fun outing, especially when they were frolicking on the beach, but it was just a bit too unbelievable when it came to how easily they had fooled those apes and made their getaway. Those beaches do look interesting, though. I might have to check them out if I ever make it out to California. Some relatives have been trying to convince us to come out there for a visit. So I wonder where they'll go from here. They can't go any farther west, that's for sure. Were they really supposed to be as far south as Malibu? Or was that just another meaningless quip from Burke? If this was actually supposed to be Paradise Cove, as in the storyline, they would have had to travel a long way from Oakland. More than 400 miles. That's well beyond a week of walking. But we don't know how long they went between episodes, and it was still just a few days' ride on horseback. Close enough for Orko's gorillas to catch them if they'd gotten word of the fugitives' location. So here's something I discovered while searching Google Maps. The original Planet of the Apes filming of the Statue of Liberty scene took place near Birdview Avenue and Cliffside Drive in Malibu. For that film, they had to transport everything to the beach by helicopter. Well, luckily, there's a switchback trail that leads from Palos Verdes Drive south down to the East Beach that was used in this episode. If you remember from my last review, there was a definite connection between the Planet of the Apes television episode and that Universal Pictures disaster film Earthquake. Now, I could find no such evidence of a connection between this episode and Universal's 1975 summer blockbuster, Jaws. But I remember how in Back to the Future 2, Marty McFly screams when the holographic ad for Jaws 19 attacks him. And he says,
"The shark still looks fake."
Well, this show's shark looked so fake when they were fighting it. That's all I've got for this episode. The show is keeping my interest, even if my viewership isn't what it was for some of the other episodes. Give me a like if you're so inclined. I enjoy reading the comments, so do that below. Also, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you'll know when I post more videos. It all seems to help. Then, be sure to keep an eye out for my next episode of Old Joe's Reminiscence.